Okay, I think this is good. I think we will start. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this event. When Steve Kauffman initially approached the archives about donating his extensive collection of political memorabilia, we saw it as a wonderful opportunity to add an addition to our print collection, hoping that we could encourage other faculty and staff to donate memorabilia that they may have collected. Then when we saw the quality of the pieces, we realized we had to display this material so that it could be shared. As this is an election year, we saw the opportunity to use this backdrop, which chronicles our presidential elections, to promote voting and political engagement. Fortunately, Jim Vike was eager to contribute as well. This event represents a true collaboration of Widener faculty from several departments. It was certainly a collaborative effort among library faculty. Kayla Van Austin, Christina Dorset, and I enjoyed creating this curated collection. I want to especially thank them for their fantastic design, sense, creativity, and dedication to detail, which produced what you see here. Now, Christina will introduce our first speaker. Thank you.
All right. Steve Kauffman, professor in Widener's Center for Social Work, will discuss how collections in general and this collection of political memorabilia in particular are created. Through an examination of his own journey, Dr. Kauffman will present ideas about motivations, processes, and the skills needed. Dr. Kauffman's whole collection includes approximately 3,000 pieces. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kauffman.
This is my last year at Widener, and I thought that it would be good for me to give something back to Widener. That's why I chose to do this. As I talk about this, I just realized I'm starting to tear up a little bit about leaving after 31 years here, so please excuse that. With that in mind, let me say if you ever, A, want to get on somebody's good side, and B, risk being bored to death, ask them about their collections. People who collect tend to be insanely focused on the minutia of whatever it is they collect. You think about people, for instance, that collect cars, and the difference between a 442 with a 2-barrel, 4-barrel, or octagonal, whatever it is they have that are octagonal, they can spend hours talking about them. Likewise, I can spend hours talking about this, but I'm going to try and keep it to the allotted time, so please excuse me on that. In any event, let me ask a question here. This is a little bit interactive, but doesn't have to be. How many of you have a collection? I'm going to define our terms here. So let's say you have 10 or more items that have some connection to one another that you at least in part intentionally collected on your own. So people have collections that have been given to them, right? And that sit on the shelf or the box and you never think about it again. But we're interested in those where there's a little bit of intention involved. So let me just quickly see hands. How many people have something that might define as collection? About half of you, right? And that fits pretty well because people collect stuff. We are affected by any one of a number of possible reasons for this. And where I want to start is to talk about why people collect. Collect whatever. And what can people collect? Literally anything. There are people that collect banana peel labels. There are people that collect Cabbage Patch dolls. There is a restaurant in Alabama, I believe, that has, you remember those Billy Bass? Really good fish they put on the wall and talk to you? Mm-hmm. That has something like 1,500 Billy Bass on its walls. People collect all kinds of things for lots and lots and lots of reasons. So what some of those reasons might be? Well, first of all, those of us who collect something with some kind of historical value or meaning often do it for a better understanding of history, understanding what was significant at what points in time, and how might those things have changed over time. I remember in the 2016 election, where Hillary Clinton was running against Donald Trump, that I received something in the mail that had a picture of both of them on it and said, "We both lose no matter what, here, buy a house," right? Went into my collection. So there are lots and lots of reasons, history being one of them. History, and for my purposes, at least in the recent years, it's been history, but also the educational value. Because many of you, some of you here are my students, know that my office has become essentially a museum, right? Museum which is transitioning over here. But I always took it as a sense of pride, really, if I could have a student come up and look at the collection and perhaps remember something from their youth, or remember something that their parents said. And that immediately gave me the opportunity to start babbling on about all of the nuances of that particular point in history or point in policy. But that's a big one. And closely related to that is the idea of preservation. We, particularly in North America, live very much a throwaway existence. We have things for a while, we change our tastes, they might be slightly damaged, and they end up in a landfill. Some of us realize that this stuff we're throwing away has meaning, has historical value, has some quality to it that makes it important for understanding why people are the way they are. Hence people collecting banana peels. I don't quite understand that one, but they do. So the educational value became very important to me. I could help my students better relate to some of the historical issues that we'd be talking about as we'd be talking about policy. Other reasons people collect. Some people collect for the value associated with items. Right? People that collect coins, for instance, very often are very conscious of what the specific monetary value of an item is, and it becomes an issue related to their investment goals, right? Some people collect gold coins. Gold coins are really pretty, really nice, really expensive, and they're probably going to be more expensive in the future. So buying them, putting them away, enjoying them once in a while is a way to have some degree of, I'll say certainty, some degree of certainty that their investments will be worthwhile in the future, right? Very common. But people collect for other reasons too. Some of it just purely aesthetics. I have members of my family that have collected over the years Chinese and Japanese art. It's actually not that expensive to get into, right? You can do it reasonably cheaply. Of course, for some ends, just like there's some things here that are insanely expensive. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the aesthetics of a wonderful Japanese Meiji period vase, or the aesthetics of a scroll that was hand done in the 16th century, is overwhelming to some people. I happen to be one of those people. I don't collect it, but I happen to be one of those people. So the aesthetics can be really important. And I will say, and honestly, some of you may disagree with this, when you walked in my office and you'd see all of this stuff around the walls, your first thought was usually, he's an idiot. The second one was, that's absolutely amazing, right? So there's a certain aesthetic quality to it. And then sometimes there are lots of more reasons, but I'll focus on the last one, because sometimes it becomes a bit of an obsession. Hence what I started with today, if you want to get on the good side of somebody, ask about their collections, because it does become a bit of obsessions with people. My own pathway to the point of obsession actually began in 1964 as a young kid. And I lived in Ohio at the time, and my dad was a hunter and fisherman, and we'd go out, and of course I didn't carry a gun, sort of handled a rod and reel, but as I'd walk along, there were all these neat little fossils along the road. All these neat little fossils, so I started collecting fossils. And suddenly I had a wall full of fossils. And then that evolved into coins and stamps, because my grandmother and grandfather had both been fairly serious coin and stamp collectors at one point. So I developed this collection of coins and stamps. Well, the fossils got put in a box, the coins and stamps went somewhere, and I have no idea where. But we moved from Ohio to Florida to Iowa. Florida right now, as we're going through quite a bit of a crisis. Florida, when I grew up, had about a third of the population that it had now, and it was absolute heaven for a 7-year-old kid. You could walk out, you could literally see flamingos flying over. You could walk down to the creeks and see turtles and snakes. And, oh, by the way, I collected exotic pets for a while too. Snakes and tadpoles and lizards and all kinds of stuff. It's absolutely beautiful. Well, then I moved to Iowa, which turned out to be a big disappointment for somebody who had grown up in that environment. Won't get into the politics of that right now, but what I will say is when I got there, it was the 1968 election, which, as some of you know, was after a period of Democratic rule. There had been a lot of chaos around how the Democratic candidate in that election was going to be selected. There were some violence associated with the convention in Chicago. Anyway, lots of things. People died, including some of our own heroes like Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy. Anyway, lots of chaos. But on my first day of school in 3rd grade, I was out on the playground and kids were over in this corner doing something odd. That looked a little bit like a drug deal today, but it wasn't. They were trading political pins. And I thought, wow, that's cool, right? So I went over and I managed to get a pin or two. It might have cost me a dime back then or whatever. It's very common today, whatever they were. But it created the next really strong reason for collecting. It can give you community. As I quickly found out on that day and from that experience, when you start collecting something, particularly if other people collect it, which political pins or political memorabilia is one example, you join into a sense of community with other people that do that. And I became the hero of the yard when I went to visit a cousin of mine who gave me a great big John F. Kennedy button. And people wanted to be my friend because they wanted to get a hold of that button. Anyway, that's what started off. We're going to skip a whole bunch of years there where girls and music got in the way to the point where we are today, in the last 20 or 30 years, which is collecting has become a passion. How do you do it? Well, I've gone to yard sales, I've gone to auctions, I've gone to flea markets. Once in a very short, long while, I'll buy something online. Usually if you buy something from dealers, it's going to cost more than buying it or finding it for free or yard sales or things like that. But for certain particular pieces, it's important, particularly political autographs, which is what I now sort of focus, that's sort of my primary thing, right? But the point is that if you have any of those reasons for wanting to collect, take advantage of it. Let it be your passion. It's not foolish to collect pieces of toast with pictures of Elvis Presley on them. It may seem silly to us if we don't collect pictures of toast with Elvis Presley on them, but it has meaning for your own passion. And by taking all of the opportunities that are available to us in this throwaway culture of going to yard sales, flea markets, talking to relatives, occasionally going to auctions, whatever the case, building up big collections is not really that difficult. I will venture to say, in my 3,000 plus items, with the exception of a few political autographs, which are pretty expensive, I haven't spent $3,000 on it. And that's over the course of 35 years. So it's not that expensive to get into a wonderful passion experience that allows you to become knowledgeable, to help educate others, to understand context, and to build community. All of those things are absolutely wonderful opportunities that collecting things promotes. And I encourage all of you to take advantage of my collection. I've given it to Widener. Take a look at it. Ask questions. Think about its meaning. Think about what the country looked like at that point. Think about the policy issues that were affecting people. And the next time you get a flyer in the mail that's got a picture of Donald Trump and Vice President Harris, remember that this has meaning for us. Somebody called it a snapshot of America. And I'm going to conclude now with one additional item that I purchased recently that I'm going to add to my own collection. And if anybody watched the Republican debate, you will remember that Hulk Hogan was quite famous for doing something in particular. I chose to do it, but not in favor of Donald Trump. Hence my collection is now grown by a piece. Thank you.
Excellent reveal. Love that. Dr. Jim Vike, professor of political science, will share some findings from his recent research of voter engagement and partisan politics. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Vike.
Thanks, Steve, for this collection, for sharing the passion of collection. Thanks to the library staff for curating this, and thanks for allowing me to come and put a little kind of connection to, Jill, that's good enough, I can take it from here, I think. So, and allowing me to share some of the work that I've been doing relative to political engagement. So one key to this notion is if you caught anything from Steve's presentation, it's passion, right? Passion and intensity. And what we know in the world of kind of political engagement, I'm very passionate about political engagement, but we know that passion and intensity of feelings and emotions are crucial to the levels, our understanding of levels of political participation. I'm going to try to get, all right, that's where I want to be. All right, so, and you guys can't see this over there, so I'll kind of talk you through a little bit, but we're familiar, I can take it with me. How about that? So we're familiar a little bit with the relationship between kind of political polarization and partisanship and political engagement. And so I just kind of focused a little bit on kind of presidential vote choice. What are some key indicators of presidential vote choice? Excitement or negativity or ambivalence, which is this kind of a challenging, a little bit fraught term that in the world of political science to determine people who are not so engaged. But how do we kind of look at how do political scientists kind of measure this notion of political and partisan polarization? Now, most of us would recognize that partisanship and intensity of partisanship has a strong connection to voter participation. Most of us are aware that the intensity of polarization has a strong connection to it. Most of us would also recognize that that political engagement is good, that political participation is good, yet we also kind of, many of us might say that political polarization itself is not a good thing, right? So we want to look at the relationship between these two things. What's the best way as a political science professor to get young students to vote? It's like get them all jacked up and partisan and polarized, right? That's the best way. But we want to try to recognize what are some of those causes. So the political scientists have kind of identified this notion of polarization as divergence of attitudes towards extremes, right? So divergence. So there's just this polarization is this separation towards extremes. These extremes can be ideological. It can be kind of liberal and conservative polarization. It can be just partisan, or it can be around candidate attitudes or perceptions of different candidates, right? So it can be personality driven, it can be policy driven, it can be ideologically driven. But the intensity matters a great deal, all right? So how many of you love political polarization? Look around the room, look around the room. Scott Van Bramer, he's pro partisan polarization, but other than that, I didn't see a single hand, right? So what do we mean? How many of you would yourself, looking in the mirror, would say you're polarized? How many of you would say, put up your hand loud and proud if you feel you're polarized? Yeah. Those of you who didn't put your hand up, we're going to assess a little bit of that. And so the politicians or the political scientists have been studying polarization, and there's multiple different measures of it. There's actually 5 key ones in the big American National Election Study. I'm the first to actually combine them and look at them kind of holistically rather than to just kind of pick one of them, particularly each measure. So I'm going to ask you some questions, right? So we're going to look at 5 different measures of partisan polarization really quickly. So we're going to start with the feeling thermometer, right? On a scale of 0 to 100, 100 being most favorable, and please don't share, just in your head, keep track, right? So on a 0 to 100 scale, how do you feel about the Democratic Party? 0 to 100, pick a number. How do you feel about the Republican Party? 0 to 100, all right? Then we think about, is there anything you like about the Democratic Party? Second measure, likes, dislikes, kind of affect. Is there anything you like about the Democratic Party? If you could build a list, what are some things you like about the Democratic Party? All right. Are there any things you don't like about the Democratic Party? Build a little list of things you might not like about the Democratic Party. And again, for the Republicans, is there anything you like about the Republican Party? Build a little list. Or any things you dislike about the Republican Party, right? So that's our partisanship measure. Then we get to the candidates. We do the same thing. Scale of 0 to 100. Kamala Harris, 0 to 100. What are your feelings towards Kamala Harris? 0 to 100. What are your feelings towards Donald Trump? 0 to 100. All right? Then we get to likes. Is there anything you like about Kamala Harris as a presidential candidate? Is there anything you dislike about Kamala Harris as a presidential candidate? Is there anything you like about Donald Trump as a presidential candidate? Is there anything you dislike about Donald Trump as a presidential candidate? And then the last one, which is kind of a little bit unique, is candidate quality assessments. To what extent do you think that Kamala Harris is honest? To what extent do you think that Donald Trump is honest? To what extent do you think that Kamala Harris is a good leader? To what extent do you think Donald Trump is a good leader? To what extent do you think that Kamala Harris cares about people like you? To what extent do you think that Kamala Harris doesn't care about people like you? All right, so candidate measures. Now I want you to self-reflect. Do you have big swings across those attitudes? So that first measure is a kind of a partisan or candidate affinity, where it is 0 to 100. If you've got a big spread, you are polarized by that partisan polarization measure. If you've got a 100 or a 0, or if you've got an 80 to a 20, if you've got a 70 to a 30, we basically set that baseline of a 40-point spread. If they're both zeros, congratulations, you're not polarized, right? So we think about, to what extent do we just like one and dislike the other, favor one, disfavor the other, assess their candidate attributes positively for one, negatively for another, all right? So these are I will just kind of scroll down here. These are the 5 different measures, right? So we have party affinity, that's that 100-point scale, how your feelings towards that kind of attachment. Then the likes and dislikes, the party affect. The candidate affinity, the likes and dislikes of the candidates. The candidate affect, or likes and dislikes of the candidates. And then the last one was knowledge, which I skipped, right? So the capacity to measure characters, or the candidate attributes, all right? So over time, so this is what's unique about my research, is I've combined these 3 rather than just picking one as my scholarly measure of political polarization. I'm looking at all 5 of them at the same time and determining the extent to which people are polarized across all of these measures or not, all right? And so if I slide over, all right? And this is my historical analysis across those 5 different measures. We have from 2008, Barack Obama's first election, 2012, Obama-Romney, 2016, Clinton-Trump, 2020, Biden-Trump. Right? I'm going to come in here and point to a couple of these things, right? So these 2 at the extremes here are the fully polarized across all of those scales. They were favorable towards the Republicans, both candidates and parties. That's these folks over here, right? And across all of the measures were favorable towards the Democrats, right? So I call that fully polarized on all the measures. My likes, my dislikes, my affinity, my candidate assessments. I can't say anything good about the opposing candidate. I can't say anything bad about my own, right? Then we have the middle. These 2 middle categories are partially, or they're kind of mostly, but maybe had some nice things to say about your opponent, about the opposition party's favorite candidate. Maybe you were able to kind of recognize some weaknesses in your own candidates. So you're polarized, but not like completely. And then there's this middle portion, right? The middle portion is what I call kind of balanced or mixed, and the scholarship kind of puts these people in the ambivalence category, right? That you're ambivalent. Well, ambivalence is like kind of undecided, right? So I have 2 minds of this thing. So maybe I like something about some, dislike some. Maybe I hate them all. If I hate them all, I'm here. If I love everybody, everybody's awesome, I'm in here. if I don't care, please stop asking me these questions. I'm in here, right? So part of my research is to look at these people and recognize this isn't just one group, it's multiple groups, different types of people. But we look at just the distribution across our American National Election Study. So those of you who can actually see the screen, I can move it if necessary. What do you see? What jumps out at you over time?
More polarization.
More polarization. What's changing, right? So more polarization. We see the Democratic polarization going from only 15% of the partisans of the electorate were kind of fully polarized towards Democrats. Only 9% were fully polarized towards Republicans, right? Now we're up at 29 and 26. So half of this electorate is now fully polarized. What's interesting to see is we may all kind of reference the 2026 election or 2016 election as really a polarizing election, yes? Mm-hmm. Look at the numbers between 2012 and 2016. No change. How do we explain that? Lots of people didn't like their own candidates in 2016. Democrats had some negative things to say about Hillary Clinton. Republicans back then had some negative things to say about Donald Trump. But by the time we get to 2020, it's only, right? And it's a rule. You can't even criticize your own candidate, right? So we're fully online, all right? So, and then we see this back in 2008, 45% of the partisans are kind of in this middle group. And that's declined down to less than 20%. Right? Let's take a closer look at these folks in the middle. All right. Actually, I did mention that this is among people who identify as partisan, but also with leaners. So it includes 85% of all the respondents. You may say, I don't align, I'm not a Democrat or I'm not a Republican, but I tend to lean that way. Well, what about the people that don't identify? What do we know about the people that refuse to identify or lean towards a party? Sometimes we call them independents, sometimes pure independents. But what do we know about what they do on election day? Jeremy? Oh, I thought you. What do they do?
Well, they don't vote down ballot.
Yeah. Well, they don't vote down ballot, or maybe even not on ballot, right? So those folks that are non-partisans, this is the distribution of non-partisans. Right? And we see people that refuse to kind of acknowledge an attachment to a party. You know, over 3/4 of them are in this middle category. These are mostly people that are kind of disengaged, disconnected. But even we see some increases in the level of polarization among people who are not kind of avowed partisans. All right? I like to point to this kind of central category, right? Because it could be that, you know, so I'm avowing independence, I'm avowing kind of I dislike polarization. Well, maybe I've just been turned off to it, right? So if we're thinking about a candidate, candidates are out there trying to mobilize their partisans, right? They're trying to show negative feelings towards the other party and the other candidates, because sometimes they may not like you, but if they really hate them, they're going to be voting for us, right? And then there's this third category of that individual who is driven away from politics because of this. Right? So ultimately, this is my research showing I'm going to be looking at a central group, trying to parse these people out because we want to be discerning. Right? We want to be able to say, yes, I recognize that there are some weaknesses in the party that I prefer. There are some weaknesses among the candidate I prefer. Yes, there are some strengths of the candidates, the opposing candidate, or so forth. If Joe Biden had still been in the race, the 2024 polarization would have been significantly minimized because many Democrats would have said, I don't really like everything about this candidate. Right? But now with Kamala Harris in, I expect to see very similar numbers here. All right, and lastly, before I want to give everybody a chance to ask Steve some more questions here. So just voter participation at Widener. I want to kind of highlight a couple of things that we've been kind of really successful at. Whoops. Over the last few years. So Widener, we participate in an all-in democracy challenge. Voter participation on our college campus, and we've received Gold Star Awards from the All-In Democracy Challenge in 2018, 2020, 2022, we'll get it again in 2024. Just very high rates, comparative rates of voter participation. I want to kind of scroll up here and show you this data, which I'm very proud of. So the national voter registration rate, and this is, whoops, I have to scroll down a touch to let you see the years. So in 2012, voter participation rate, 59% nationwide, 47% among our Carnegie classification, and 54% at Widener. So in 2020, we were a little below the national average. 2014, really low year, right? So we get to the 2016 election, we see for the first time Widener main campus kind of exceeds overall voter turnout. We see a dramatic increase from 25 to 48 in the 2018 election. And we see here nationwide voter turnout rate of 67%, the Widener campus, main campus in Chester, 78% voter turnout, substantially better than our Carnegie Research Institution, comparable institutions, better than national average, better than the average of Delaware County. And we kind of break it down a little bit, and we have our voter registration rate went up from 76 in 2012 to 88%. Our overall turnout, as I mentioned, was 78%. This one right here is amazing, all right? 18 to 21-year-old voter turnout, 2012, 36%, 2016, 54%, 77% voter turnout, right? And one of the things, the arguments in the past has been that Widener has higher voter turnout because we got lots of graduate students, they're older, they vote at higher rates and so forth. Actually, our 18 to 21-year-olds voted at a higher rate than our graduate students did in the 2020 election. So we've been doing a great work trying to mobilize students, help students recognize what's going on, why we should participate. Vote for whomever you'd like, but we really encourage people to vote. We also send a message to those who are not eligible to vote. Try explaining to someone else, if you would like to vote but you're not eligible, try explaining to someone else who is eligible to vote but not thinking about, hey, this is what I would do if I was eligible, right? This is why I think if I wish I had the right to vote, because then I would take advantage of it. I think you should too. And then lastly, I just kind of have a couple of things going on. Tomorrow is going to be #Widener Votes Day. So there will be yellow flowers scattered around the campus. There'll be some posters, and we're really encouraging people to click on our poster here, hit the QR code, which will take you to a voter registration or check the voter registration site. So we're really pushing. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jim and Steve, for those great presentations. We do have time for questions, so feel free to raise some hands and I can walk around with the microphone. We're also going to pull up some of the archives digital collections that showcase our presidents that have visited our campus and a few other collections as well. And of course, when we're all done with that, you can please feel free to take a look at all the great different individual items in our collections. All right, questions for Steve and Jim? Molly! I don't know if I'm going to be able to navigate other people.
I'll meet you halfway.
Okay.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you both for our speakers and to Jill and Christina and Kayla for putting together a wonderful event. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Molly Wolf. I'm the executive director of the Wolfgram Library. So I'm so excited to see everybody show up for this. This is great. I mean, this is thrilling. This is what the library should be. But my question is for Steve. I've looked through what's on display here. I hope you all do the same. And some of the items are just so I mean, they're just so unique. I mean, there's a Jimmy Carter radio. Why did someone make that? I can't wrap my mind around some of these things. But as the person who amassed this amazing collection, and this is going to be a hard question to answer, do you have one or two favorite items?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I do, and I don't think it's up here. All right, some of you know about the collections of religious relics that people have in various churches around Europe and things like that. I don't have anything like that. but I do have Mary Lincoln's hair. So Billy Steele actually have one strand of Mary Lincoln's hair. So that's probably my single favorite item. And everything else is equal after that. But that's
Any other questions?
Hi, Jim, quick question for you. Your student participation numbers didn't go back to 2008. Do you have any information about that? And did the fact that President Obama came to campus that year have any impact?
So the numbers that we have are unique in that they are real numbers. They're not survey projections. So we participated with an organization called the National Survey of Student Learning and Voting, the NSELV. And what they do is our campus actually participates. We share our student data. And then after the election, they go back and they pull that data and actually check to what extent these students, they look for them. Where are these students? Are they registered to vote? And so forth. And so it takes like a year or so forth afterwards to get the actual data. So, and we didn't become a member until 2012. But the example of the mobilizing aspects of a candidate visit, right? So obviously we're in Pennsylvania now, so the attention and the focus, right? So competitiveness is really important, but also kind of mobilization efforts to what extent they're trying to get you out there, to what extent you know about different things. I did want to kind of add one of the things. So if I was to do a reveal, it would be a hashtag to register to vote, right? So that's ultimately, or a QR code, right? So yeah, so. All right, so it'd be I don't know, I called it a hashtag, I meant a QR code. But, I guess that called me out there.
All right, other questions?
Hi, my question is for both of you. I often hear people say that not voting is a neutral response to a difficult decision. Can you give us a response of why or why not deciding to not vote is or is not neutral?
So I totally stand by an individual's right to not vote. One question we typically follow up is, what does silence mean? Right? And a common reference to silence means consent. So if I am completely unhappy with the way politics is going this day and I choose not to participate, that can easily be interpreted by the politicians as agreement and consent that I'm fine. So actually casting a ballot, I find the movements to kind of none of the above to be kind of compelling and really interesting capacity to get that voice out there. But it's also the primary form by which our representatives understand who their people are and what they actually stand for and so forth. So I think voting is a key expression of that. There's a bunch of other things in states in which there's not as competitive election. It may not seem so important. But as Steve will be able to tell you, that just wearing a button, just declaring, putting out a sign, saying, hey, I'm endorsing this person is like a hugely important and powerful communication of political engagement, right? So there's some really simple things that people can do. And so if you don't want to vote, but you send an email to an elected official or share something on social media or express a preference some other way, right? There's lots of ways to communicate preferences to elected officials.
I think Jim captured it pretty well. The only thing I'll add to that is that we are amazingly fortunate to live in a society where we have some control, obviously not complete, but some control over the destiny of ourselves and our future generations. And to throw that away to me seems almost a sin. Mm-hmm. There are always going to be some differences. I believe it was Barry Goldwater that said there's not a dime's worth of difference between the Republican and the Democratic Party. In some perspectives, it may not be. But there are always going to be some policy positions, some values, something that you think important, that by not voting, you've thrown away that opportunity to express that. So I can't add anything else to what Jim said, except to me, it seems like you're throwing away one of the few things that you have at least some input on as an American and as a world citizen, and that's, to me, sad.
Any other questions?
I just had a question. So a lot of times, especially now with how close the race is, kind of piggybacking off of that question, I hear a lot of people say that like a vote for a third party is a waste of a vote, or it's not as valuable, especially when the race is so close. Can you like kind of respond to that and your point of view of that kind of argument?
You got third party stuff in here?
Yeah.
All right. Third party stuff I mentioned.
Yeah, from time to time in this country, well, virtually every election, there are always other constituencies that are represented through what we call third parties. And as you know, the Democrats and the Republicans sort of dominate the political landscape and have since the 1860s. These third parties often have important things to say. The question, however, becomes, are the important things that they have to say more important than the actual feet on the ground decisions that are made by our elected officials? And that's a choice that everybody has to make on their own. But again, I stand by what I say, that if you're not making a choice, you're throwing away one of the few things that you have as an American citizen that is incredibly valuable. But yeah, I've got Prohibition Party up here from the 1920s. I've got, let's see, some other interesting ones. I've got the Bull Moose Party from the early teens. I have lots and lots of things from these various parties over the time. I've got lots of George Wallace stuff, who ran third party candidate. And at times they have done a reasonably good job of capturing a number of states. And at times that has been enough to flip the difference. We think about what happened in the 2016 election, where just a few thousand votes for Jill Stein in Wisconsin made the difference, or the Blue Wall states, or most interestingly and unfortunately to some degree, in the 2000 election where Al Gore lost because of Ralph Nader, who's a person that I have infinite respect for. So it's important not to lose track of where the game is ultimately taking us.
I would just kind of add from the campaign perspective and the prospects of winning. So a vote for Trump is one vote, and a vote for Harris is one vote. If there's a question Trump voter who isn't going to vote for Trump, and they shift over and they vote for Harris, that's a 2-vote swing. If they come down one and vote for a third party, or they don't vote, that's just a 1-vote advantage, right? So flipping the vote actually is 2 votes. Takes one away from one, gives another, right? So it has that double counting effect, which I think is really significant. If someone is questioning their affiliation with the Democratic Party, thinking about a third party candidate, so that, again, a 1-vote swing versus a potential 2-vote swing. It leads the campaigns, I want to kind of make it clear, it leads the campaigns to say, I can't get you to flip to me, but I can try to make you not vote, right? And so when we think about, so it's like when you go to your pantry and you say, I'm going to get some cereal, and you look at your cereal and you go, why do I have all name brand cereal? It's probably because of advertising or so forth. If you're thinking about, I should vote for this third party candidate, you have to kind of wonder, am I hearing about this third party candidate because I'm being pushed to go for this third party candidate as part of a campaign strategy? I mean, the RFK Jr. scenario was really compelling this year because he had both Democrats and Republicans at one point kind of, right? And there was this question, right? And then since he dropped out and kind of went with Trump, that's kind of clarified that. It's added that negative partisanship component to, I would say, a bunch of the people who would maybe have been Democrats that would have gone to them are now kind of shying away from that. But I think it is really important. It does change. There's something called, so if the parties aren't talking about an issue, a minor party comes in, talks about it, it brings it to the attention. They typically don't win, but the candidates and the parties actually have to address their particular issue. That's what happened with Ross Perot in his campaign runs, is it really made the major parties start to talk about the debt and the deficit a lot more than they used to.
Hi, I'm Steve Kauffman's wife, so I don't have to ask him anything. I did want to ask Jim, I personally have felt very frustrated by the Electoral College lately. And can you tell me anything good about it?
My perspective on the Electoral College or any type of grand changes is to try to think about the future, and so try to get the parties to adopt a change that will take effect in 20 years, right? So, because if you think about like Nebraska right now, whether we should flip the way we distribute our Electoral College votes in the state by district, and they're like, oh, well, this could make one vote could swing the outcome of the election. It's like, let's take away this year's perspective and just say in 20 years we're going to change it. Because every party looking back, we kind of think about now, and we think about blue states and red states. Well, we just go back to Obama, and there's red states that were blue states, and blue states that were red states, and there's transition happening, people are moving around, preferences are changing, and so forth. So I like to think about the future, and I think talking about changing the Electoral College within 1 month of the election is a kind of silly activity, right? You can lament it and so forth, but if you're trying to make a change, you have to get as far away from the actual current election outcomes as you can.
Okay, well, we can wrap up then. So, as you've maybe heard multiple times today, please make sure you're registered to vote. You can go to vote.gov. We have a QR code right behind you. Thank you so much, Vanna. So please make sure check your status. Please register. We have the registration dates for our Pennsylvania and surrounding states listed on here. Pennsylvania is October 21st, so please double check that. Yeah, and feel free to come and look at the beautiful collections here. You can even ask me how I drained Billy Carter beer. So thank you.